This is Gemara Nedarim Daf Samach Ches. Apologies for the lateness of today's shir. B'siyata d'shmaya. Tomorrow's should be back up the day before as usual. Today's shir, as well as all the learning for the month of Teves, has been generously sponsored by an avid Daf listener, close friend, as a schus ili neshama for his father, Rav Aryeh ben Rav Yaakov. B'siyata d'shmaya, the learning the entire Chabura should bring Rav Aryeh ben Rav Yaakov, a year that was from Radin, a year gone by, should bring Rav Aryeh ben Rav Yaakov to a higher place in Gan Eden Shel Maila. We're holding on Samachesam and Aleph as the Gemara begins. Devei Rabbi Yishmael Tana, that in the yeshiva Rabbi Yishmael they learned. Now this is a continuation of yesterday's daf. Yesterday's daf we focused on one din, on the din of a naira hamu'urasa. As a reminder, a naira hamu'urasa is a naira, a girl between the age of 12 and 12 and a half. Hamu'urasa, that Erisin performed. So she's floating between two worlds, between the fact that she's not a ketana and she's not a gedayla, and between the fact that she did Erisin but not Nesuin. So she's partially out of her father's rishos and she's partially into her husband's rishos. So the halacha is avia ubaila. Her husband, her arus, and her father in conjunction can be made for her nedarim. So yesterday we had source number one for this din. Comes along Dvei Rabbi Yishmael and he teaches us a new source. Says in the Torah, Bein ish leishtai, bein av lebitai. The Torah teaches us that there are certain dinim that are between a man and his wife, and between a father and his daughter. And what do we learn out from here? Says the Gemara, Mikan lenaira hamurasa shavio baila mefir nidara. From here we see that a naira murasa has her nedarim annulled, be mefer by father and husband. So let's look quickly at the Ran for a moment. The Ran teaches us, where do we see this from the pasuk, the top Ran on the page? Demashmalei debenaira hamurasa ayri. Why? How do I see in this pasuk naira marasa? Midechse, for the fact that it says bahukra benurel beisaviyos. We see it's a naira. Umidesamach av lebitai, from the smichos. The Torah writes things together for the fact that it put next to each other. Av, a father, lebitai to daughter. Bahade next door to ish, to husband. Mashma, so the mashmayis of this smichos, of this putting the two psukim together, is that there is a joint endeavor going on. Ta'av ubal mefirin nida reha. Source of Dvei Rabbi Yishmael. Says the Gemara, Ulatanim Dvei Rabbi Yishmael, according to this din of Talmud Dvei Rabbi Yishmael, Imayasiel Ishmael Avidlei. What do they do with the pasuk that we learned yesterday? What do they do with the pasuk of Imayasiel Ish? Explains the Gemara. Mukim, they do with this. Le'idach de Rava. This teaches us a different din of Rava, a din of Rava that's going to take us a few days to get to, that we're going to get to on Daf Ayin Amud Aleph. Now, what is this din of Rava, or this din of Rabbo? It should be more particular that we're going to get to Ayin Amud Aleph. So the Ran over here speaks out. Again, this is the second round on the page. The Amar Lekaman, Makish Koidme Havaya Shniya, Le Koidme Havaya Rishayna. The case in Rabbah that we're going to get to in Daf Ayin is someone that did Erisin 2 times. How can you do Erisin 2 times? She does Erisin to one husband, and that husband either divorces or dies. And then she does Erisin to a second husband. So we learn that there's a hekesh between her status prior to the first Erisin, which was what? That she's in her husband's rishos. Prior to the first Erisin, that she's in what? In her father's rishos. To prior to the second Erisin, that she's in what? Back in her father's rishos. Just like originally when she was a naira before she did Erisin, what was the halacha? Her father had sole rights to her. So too, after she did Erisin, so usually Erisin, she now enters into the rishos of the aris. But then that man either divorces or dies. She reverts completely back to the father's rishos. That is the din of Rab. So Devei Rabbi Yishmael need the pasuk of Imaya Sia Leish to teach us this extra din this extra din of Rabba or Rava, the extra din of Rabba, just to point out what's going on over here with this Rabba business, is that the Meseres HaShas, let's get, where's the Meseres HaShas? Excuse me. The Meseres HaShas, there it is. If you look at the term HaShas, top corner over here, it says Isa de Rabba, Virabba Vigirsa Yalkut is Rava. So it's a Girsa question whether it's Rabba or Rava. But either way, says the Gemara, so Tanat Ver Yishmael needs the pasuk from yesterday, V'mayas to teach us this din, that after Erusin, if that man dies or divorces, she goes completely back to her father's rishos. V'Rabba, hi, the Tanat Ver Yishmael, my avidly. So according to Rabba, what does he do? Where does he know the din of Tanat Ver Yishmael? Where does he know the din that a Naira Hamurasa via Baila Mefir Nedarim? Answers the Gemara, Mi Baile Loimar, Shabal Mefir Nedarim, Shebeinai Lebeina. You know what he needs the pasuk of Tanat Ver Yishmael? He needs the excuse me, I learned that wrong. Again, according to Rabba now has an extra pasuk. Tanat Ver Yishmael need to be initially ishtai, and then they have a pasuk din of Rabba. So now Rabba's din, let's say this clearly. Tanat Ver Yishmael had been initially ishtai to teach us a Naira Hamurasa has her Nedarim being mefered by Av and husband. So now they have an extra pasuk in Mayasiyah Ish that they use for the din of Rabba. According to Rabba, what do they do with the pasuk of Devei Rabbi Yishmael? What do they do with the pasuk of Bein Ish Le'ishtay? Answers the Gemara. They teach us a different din. They teach us the din of that the husband is allowed to be made for the Nedarim Beinai Lebeina. Let's look at the Ran over here. The Ran in the second medium-sized line teaches us the Nidre Inoi Nefesh, the Nedarim with regard to Inoi Nefesh, personal affliction. Behed Yiksivi, a pasuk in Ramidr, Kol Nezel Choshu as Israel Anis Nafesh. Obein Ish Le'ishtay Itzrich. So now that's for a personal neder. What about a neder that's between husband and wife? It's tzricha ledvarim shebeina lebeina. So that's what they need the extra pasuk of the very Yishmael bein ish le'ishtay to teach us. So that is source number 2 for the din of the Mishnah. What Tanat Ver Yishmael uses the pasuk of yesterday v'ayisi le'ish, and what Rabba does with the pasuk of Tanat Ver Yishmael. Now says the Gemara Ibayilahu, a fundamental shayla. So we've been learning since we started this parak yesterday, this din of Naira Hamurasa, Avio Baila Mefir Nedarim. It happens in tandem. Father and husband together are made for the Nedarim. Ask the Gemara, Samaches Saman Aleph, 10 lines down, first word line is Lahu, a fundamental shayla. Baal Megaz Gayiz, Oy Miklash Kolish. When the husband does his part, what is the part of the husband? Is the part of the husband when he's made for his half, we'll call it. Does it make gazgayis? Does it cut the neder in half? Or miklash kolish? Or does it weaken the entirety of the neder? Now everyone's wondering, those two things sound very similar. If I have 100% and I cut it in half, I have 50%. If I have 100% and I weaken it, I have 50% as well. So what's the difference? So the Gemara now explains. You know what the case is that we're asking? We have a woman, we have a Naira Hamurasa that makes a neder that she's not going to eat 2 zaysim of a certain food. Vishama Aris, and her new husband, the Aris, hears, and what happens? Ve'efer la, and he annuls his part of the neder. Ve'achal ton, and then before the father does anything, so now we have a neder that was quasi annulled, partially mayfared by the husband. She then goes and eats that which she made a neder against. She made a neder, she's not going to have 2 zaysim of pizza. The husband is made for the neder, and she goes and she eats the 2 zaysim of pizza. If we say that what did the husband's annulment do? It chopped it in half. So originally there was a neder gets 2 zaysim pizza, let's just call it 2 slices for simplistic purposes. The husband chops it in half, now what? There's a neder against 1 slice. She goes and she has 1 slice, 1 zayis. She was over her neder. What's the halacha lakye? So she gets malchus. However, if we say no, that what the husband did, he weakens, he waters down the whole thing. What does it mean he waters down the whole thing? It doesn't mean that he takes 2 zaysim and he chops it in half. It means it lessens the severity of that which he said. And it's no longer a neder with the full power, which would do what? Give malchus if you violate. But rather now, Yisura Ba'al Moho, now the neder is a mere, still aser, but you don't get malchus. So what is the halacha? Fundamental shaila asks the Gemara beautifully, what is the status if a husband annuls his half? Does he chop it in half, and therefore if it's 2 zaysim and she eats 1 zayis, it's still malchus, or no? It weakens the whole thing, it's no longer malchus, and it's only iser. Tashema, says the Gemara, let's bring a raya. Let's bring a raya from a brisa that discusses the Mishnah on Daf Ayin. A Masai Omru. When do we say Meisa Abal Nisraikna Rishus La'af? We're going to see that there's going to be 2 halves. We're going to have a case, because we're discussing Anaya Marasa, that Avia Ubayla, there's 2 big players over here. So if one of them dies, what happens to the neder? So we're going to have 5 different cases, and the 5th case is going to be the proof. But we have 2 different variables. The first halacha is when the husband dies, nisraikna. It empties out literally. That nisraikna rishus la'av, it transfers to the father, and now the father can annul the whole neder. That's one half of the coin. The other half of the coin that we'll see in a moment is meis ha'av. When the father dies, it's loy nisraikna rishus labal. It does not empty out to the husband. Again, if the husband dies, it empties out to the husband, to the father. And very simple way of understanding this is because the father originally had power over his daughter. So now she gets married, she does erusin, so it's her and the husband. Husband dies, it goes back to the father in some cases. But in the scenario in which the father's the one that dies, it's never going to fully transfer over to the husband. So let's read through all the cases, get to the raya at the end, then we'll take case by case again, utilizing the fabulous notes of Daf Achai. Is wet. The husband did not hear about this neder before he dies. So this woman makes a neder. Husband doesn't know about it. He drops dead, goes fully back to the father. The father could fully be made for the neder. Or the husband heard and it was quiet. Or he died and he heard. He was made for and he died at the day. Zui sheshaninu. This is the klal. Meis habal risraika rishos la'af. We flip over to a small, but of course, as always, a fundamental Amid Beis. Says the Gemara, Sameches Amid Beis. Avo. However, teaching us the flip side case. If the husband heard and he was mikayim the neder, and as we learned yesterday, mikayim means to certify, means to qualify, means to give the stamp of approval. It's a good neder. So if the husband heard and he qualified, and he died on the next day, which means there was a 24-hour, there was a full day that this neder stood. The husband heard about it, and he was not made for it. Then, ein yachal lahafer. Then the father can no longer be made for. So even though in the general rule, the halacha is that a husband dies, it transfers to the father. It's not in all cases. It's only in 2. It's only in 1 out of 2 cases. Shama via continues the Gemara with the next case. If the father heard the father dies. This is the inverse. It does not transfer over to the husband. Like we said, the husband never had full rights. So now that the father dies, the husband does not get those rights. Shama ba'ila v'hefer la. But let's say the husband heard about it and he was made for his half. And the father did not have a chance. And the father did not have a chance to be made for it until the husband died. Zui shashaninu meisabal nisraik rishos laf. Again, that it's going to what? One second. No, again, this is, I didn't run through a stop sign, I just didn't fully pause. Again, so we just finished saying, Zui shashaninu meisaav loy nisraik rishos labal. Does not transfer. So we have one case, husband dies, transfers to the father. Father dies, does not transfer to the husband. Now we continue. Shama ba'ila, going back to part A. Shama ba'ila v'hefer la, the husband was made for v'lo speak avla shema shemeisabal till the husband died. Zui shashininu meisabal. Again, this like Rishoslav, it goes to the father. Shama ba'ila v'hafer la, if the husband heard and he was yes mefer. V'lo hispik avla shema, and the father didn't hear about it shemeis. Because the father is only made for only made for b'shotfis. Now, in case number 5, this is the punchline. The father hears, and he was made for it. And the husband does not have a chance to hear ad shemeis before the husband dies. The father gets back the portion of the husband. These are the critical words. Samachtes and Aleph, 3 lines down. Hey, divrei Beis Shammai. Beis Shammai say if the father, one more time, if the husband didn't hear about it until he died, then it goes back to the father. Beis Hillel Imrim, no. Ein yachal affair. It does not go back to the father. So Shema Mina, and here's the proof that we've been looking for. LeBeis Shammai megiz gayis. According to Beis Shammai, what's the halacha? It cuts it in half. Therefore, according to Beis Shammai, since it cuts it in half, if the husband didn't hear about it and then he died, the father's going to be able to finish the story. But LeBeis Hillel miklash kolish. According to Beis Hillel, he weakened it. Therefore, when the father heard and he annulled it, he weakened it. So now that the husband died, the father can't do anything more. It's already a weakened there. He's no slack to pick up. He cannot fully be made for now. Shema Mina, says the Gemara. We have a conclusive proof. Shema Mina, that indeed our original Shaila is what? A machlokes, Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel. So let's get some clarity in that which we just learned, utilizing these beautiful notes once again of Daf HaChaim. First of all, again, we have a beautiful chazara. Rabba says, this was yesterday. That's the source. Remember, Siyah shows you the Erisin. Devei Rabbi Yishmael, this is today's source. Husband. Bein av lebitoi, father. Binu reo naira beis avia. So what do we have? We have the whole party together. Naira, Murasa, Av, Baila, Mefer Nedarim, source of Devei Rabbi Yishmael. It comes along the Gemara, Ibayilahu. How does it work when one party is made for the neder? Do we say Baal Megas Gayis or Miklash Kolish? Does it remove half or does it weaken it? What's the difference? The difference is going to be from a case where your nadar betrays eatim. We said 2 pieces of pizza. If it's Megas Gayis, you still get the Malkos because you ate 1 full Zayis. If it's Miklash Kolish, it's just an Isser. So says the Gemara, let's bring a proof from the Braisa that explains it's a machlekes tanoim. What was the final proof? Beis Shammai Megas Gayis, Beis Hillel Miklash Kolish. Now let's understand where we got that from. So now we're rewinding and we're going over this final Braisa that brought us to this raya. There's a fundamental din on the Mishnah Daf Ayin, as we explained. Meisav loy nisraik nurshas tabal. Father dies. the aris does not take over, Mesabal, then yes, Risraika Rishos La'av. It does go back to the father. So Tashema, now we're going to go through all the permutations that we quote in the Gemara. We're starting from the right to left. When does a yes go to the father? If husband didn't hear about it, or he heard and he annulled his half, or he heard and he was quiet and he died on that day, then what? It goes to the father. Why? Because the husband was not mekayim it, and the father, as we said, comes mikoicha, he reverts back to the power that he had, he can be made for it. But if the husband heard and he was mekayim, or the husband heard and he was quiet and he died the next day, which is a form of kiyum that we're going to learn, by hearing and doing nothing, and then you have a full day that elapses, that's a form of kiyum. Ein yachal lahafer, the father cannot be made for anymore, because that's considered a kaima baal, that the husband was yes mekayim it. However, let's say if the father heard about it and he was not made for it, and the baal lo hispik abal lishmaya till before the father died, then the husband does not get the power. Loy nisrak the rishus labal, as we explained, even though it's a chiddush. Let's hold it on this chiddush for a moment. Let's hold it on this chiddush. What's the chiddush? That even though the father was already mefer, so you would think it's a weak in neder. Afal gav dai nidra kolish tuva. Still, the husband does not take over from the father. However, shama ba'al v'hafer la. If the husband was one that was made for it, then died, and then the father dies, still, ein abal yachal ha'ofer, again, as we just explained, aris does not take over the father's kayach, and therefore the husband can only be made for be'eshotfis. And finally, the case that is the proof that we started off with, shama abal v'hefer la, and the father did not get a chance to hear it until the husband died. Zui sheshanino, the father does get it. But if the father heard and he was mefer, and the husband lo hispik abal lishmaya until he died, chayzer av, and could do his half, and this is the machloikes. Hey nein divrei Beis Shammai that chayzer av umefer chalko shel baal, whereas Beis Hillel says you cannot. Why not? Because Beis Hillel says miklash kolish. Since it's weak and there's nothing to empty out to the father. Whereas according to Beis Shammai, it cuts off. Therefore, yes, empties out to the father. We'll pick up from here in the next year. B'siyata dishmaya.